Here's a question. Can you design a visual identity, a whole one, in 5 hours? Sometimes I just like to show you my process, but I can't show you with full clients because either the businesses haven't started yet or I'm under NDA. Makes it a bit difficult to show you exactly what I've done. To hone in on my skills and to keep designing things and to show you what I do, I wanted to do a fake brief for you to show you my process of creating a visual identity. So I went to ChatGPT. I wanted a name for a brand and a brief to design their whole visual identity and logo. Tasty Trove was the name. Tasty Trove is kind of like HelloFresh, it's a competitor, but the unique selling point is where the things come from, where the produce comes from. I'll link the brief down below in the Miller note where you can take a look at the creative brief and see how well I've done, but I'm going to show you the process. The one thing about Tasty Trove is that it is a trove, like a treasure trove. It's a box that has lots of goodies in it, and I wanted to get that across, but I wanted to get across the adventurous lifestyle aesthetic, I can say it, in the creative brief. It was important to segment Tasty Trove from HelloFresh and other competitors by this branding decision. So my concept in my head that I wanted to go across was this sort of hipsterish look with a modern twist, like a wink to the old days of tobacco tins, making it a bit more modern, airy. How can I make it feel like a butcher is bringing their produce straight to your door? So with that in mind, I went to mood boarding. Now obviously I've only got 5 hours and I was kind of timing myself for how much time I had left in the day. So I didn't spend loads of time on the mood board, but I used Miller notes where I just dragged in images from pixels of keywords that I was using. Obviously a big word of tasty. I wanted to get pictures of burgers, produce, but also sustainability. That's a huge part of this brand. We wanted it to look sustainable. So when people found it or saw it on someone else's doorstep or they saw a product out of the box, they would know that it's sustainable but quality. We don't want any corporate feelings. I put in some images of a car and some playful typography as well, some hand lettering. Now that was really important. One way of getting rid of that minimal corporate look is by making it intentionally imperfect. That gives a more of a home, rustic feeling. So I started to annotate some of these images that I found. I like the old school hand lettering, the vintage style, but my concept was to use a modern font or a typeface or lettering and give it a vintage composition. I dug out my iPad. Now I haven't got long, so I've got to try and sketch as much as possible. And I was using an app called Adobe Fresco. Now this is an app that a lot of creatives sleep on, including myself over the years. The reason why I'm using Adobe Fresco is the fact that it's got precision tools inside it. It's kind of like it was made for a logo designer or someone who does hand lettering. There's rulers, circles as guides, and the pencil in there is just to die for. It's one of the best brush pencils I've ever used. So I started sketching and I had this idea of creating a script type to see what it would look like. How would I compose Tasty Trove together? Because remember, we have to keep this in a square. A lot of the time, logos can fit wide and they can fit square. Now the problem with having it wide is that it looks bad when it's on social media. The problem with having it square is it looks bad on a letterhead or on a masthead of a website or on a long box that you're getting delivered to your door. So I knew I had to create some variations of this, so I started drawing out this script lettering to see what it would look like. I was quite happy with the script lettering. I knew I wanted to keep it somewhere, but what I wasn't happy about was the thick and thins. It looked too much like a brush script, which gave it made it look too old and vintage. So one way I thought to get rid of it was doing monoline lettering or a monoline version of it, which is one consistent line creating the text all the way through. I put that in the back burner and I started another composition. This composition was just me basically wireframing a layout for bringing into Illustrator, and this is how simple it was. I created these two wavy lines as my guides and I just used the words Tasty Trove and put them in as a sans serif. Very quick, I didn't even fix them all up, but I liked the way that it looked. It could fit into a box or just a wide rectangle if needed, so that was a win for me. Because I was running out of time, the next thing was to go into Illustrator and start actually creating some concepts for the main logo. I had a lot of ideas. First thing I did was find a typeface. I liked Anton. That's a really nice condensed sans serif. It's got the right thickness for it to be a display type as well, so that you can see it from large distances. It's quite bold and it didn't look uber modern like minimalist and corporate. It didn't have any of that. felt it was just right. I went ahead and created a warp in them very easily by just using the warp function in Illustrator, and I created this rise as well as a flag effect. The rise effect worked a lot better, it just looked nicer. Now the cool thing about Tasty Trove is that they've got similar spacing, so that means that there's a lot of balance there. You can actually separate the words Tasty and Trove and it will still be balanced, so I had this idea of bringing them outwards. I liked the way that it looked by itself, but what if we needed more information? So with the pressure of time, I filled in the space to the right and left with established 2019, which I think is one of the biggest cop-outs of adding information into a logo to pad it out. But it also gives that authentic feeling to it too, like a homegrown business. So right now I had Treasure Trove as one main logo. I had one that was spread out, so it was Treasure and Trove with established 2019. And I also had one which was Tasty and Trove in small. I think I was saying Treasure. It's Tasty. Now for the color palette, before I started bringing it into Illustrator, what I did was I took the colors from the actual mood board. I took a screenshot of all the images, brought it into Illustrator, and there's this create mosaic effect, which essentially makes the picture into a load of vector squares based on the colors, which is a great way of getting a color palette fast. So I found the red that I liked. Now the only problem I had was trying to come up with an icon, and I knew time was ticking. The logo is only a very minor part of the brand identity, although being very important. A visual identity is more of a system rather than just like things on a page. It's more of a system of how things play out, and that's what takes the longest for me. So I just put the letters T and T together and framed it in this nice rectangle graphic device. Anything that's called a graphic device, if you don't know, is basically something that surrounds an icon or a logo, which makes it frame better. It's kind of like creating its own clear space. Now I wasn't happy particularly with just the way that it was. I thought that this sort of brand needed a bit more of a playful twist to it, and the way to do that was to create lettering surrounding it. So I created multiple versions of the logo that could be used in different ways, holding to the same Anton type style, but then I created the monoline version of Tasty Trove with a similar composition, one that was just wide, Tasty Trove, and one that was, top to bottom at a slight angle, Tasty Trove. The inspiration for this was more like a signature to put on some marketing material if they needed it. So now that I've got most of the logos done, I sort of gridded them up into Illustrator, put them in to see the color palettes behind them. I chose this nice brown, it looked like cardboard. I was imagining like an old English butcher shop. What colors would you find in there? I wanted that sense of it being homely and not completely corporate. If you're a graphic designer without a website, then that's not good. You're not going to get any work. And if you're a graphic designer with a bad website, then that's not good either. It's not a good client experience. Well, Squarespace is sponsoring this video because they have thousands of fully customizable, award-winning templates that you can change, that you can edit to however you need it to be for your brand. Whether you're working as a freelancer or whether you have a design job or a job somewhere else, get your own website. Doesn't matter who you are, websites are a great place to show who you are. Posting on Instagram and social media isn't enough nowadays. You may see folk like me doing that, and you probably attribute a lot of our work from there. We update our website a lot. Now, with Squarespace, you can get 10% off by using our link down below in the description, not only just on the website itself, but on the domains that it has. So if you're a bit freaked out about all of the things you have to do for a website, like get the domain, set up an email attached to that domain for Gmail, even just getting it live and designing it, then don't worry, because you don't have to be a web design wizard knowing all the coding to do this. It's basically visual like what we normally do. So you get 10% off if you use my link down below, but a little tip, you can actually start using Squarespace and designing your own website beforehand with a free trial. Then when you're ready to hit publish, you can use my 10% discount code down below or link down below, and you'll be off to the races. Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring this video. So I've got the logo and I've got the color palette. Now it's time for more of the actual visual identity, which is everything surrounding it. I created these illustrations, these just lined artwork in my iPad, like a bone, an apple, chef hat, cherries, things like that. I want all these illustrations to look consistent all the way through, so I used the same brush and the same thickness of brush to create that, as well as the monoline type. step. Then I started working on some advertising things. Something that I wanted to do to make it look a bit more upmarket, but also great for marketing material, is to create random words, just to letter them out in my style, making it look more like a scribble that we could use either on the product packaging to make it look just that bit different when it's on the shelf or in the box, or just on Instagram and anywhere that they're marketing. So I wrote down in fancy writing: burger, flavor, making food, pizza, all that stuff. So with all those illustrations and letters, it's not only great just to have for marketing, but it's great for patterns. Something that you can do as a logo designer is to create a visual identity, is create a pattern somehow. Obviously, I couldn't create a pattern based upon just the word Tasty Trove. It would just look a bit too obvious. So what do? We use the visuals of what it's selling if it's applicable or appropriate. And in this case, all of those visuals look great on a pattern. I just created a quick one inside of Illustrator, made it into a swatch, and now it can be used everywhere on the packaging. This section is where I can tell a lot of designers from being professional to amateur. Showing images to your client or having just images on the page, kind of like a mood board, but not. Hear me out. Having these images as part of the brand helps solidify what can be shown from the brand. Remember, a visual identity is more about what shouldn't be shown rather than what should be. So I got these images of Unsplash, of basically a butcher with the similar background, similar color schemes of the red meat, with a similar camera lens too and a similar filter. So it had the same mood, same feeling, and I plonked them into Illustrator and just tested the logo on top of them. This is a great way of testing to see how people would see it online on marketing materials, because obviously with brands like Tasty Trove, they're going to be heavily marketed on Instagram and Facebook, and they'll be using images like this to show off their product. So I used two different versions of the logo. I even tried the icon and I didn't like the way it was, so I've sort of scrapped that icon for now, and even put in just the funny lettering of to see what it would be like. And it's amazing how the brand starts popping off and how it works. You can sort of see the system it's taking place. Now it was time to see how we lay this out. Obviously, this brand is completely different, not based upon just the produce. Everywhere sells beef, everywhere has beef. This brand was unique because of its branding and its positioning, like what it's wanting to do. So I had this idea of bringing in all the elements of the identity, just shove it in basically at first, and that's the foundation. So we got the pattern, it's in the background. I could take it or leave it having the pattern there in the background, but it was just to help me get into the flow. Obviously write beef at top and add in the main logo that I wanted to use, the one that would be the most visually enticing, but also the one that has the best brand recognition and awareness. Put some more information at the bottom, but then I also shoved in one of the illustrations there again. I wanted this to be like a major part of the brand going forward, of all the visuals, having something cheeky in there, something a bit, nothing corporate, just something homely. But it didn't look good for a while. I didn't like it. It kind of looked weird and, a bit too artistic. So I went online, I had a look to see what other meat packages have, and saw they had pictures of cows on there, and it was perfect. I went and found some cool illustrations, line drawings of cows, and I put it onto the packaging, and I just did it hierarchically. Beef, Tasty Trove, cow, so people know it's definitely a cow, and more information at the bottom with just to make people double take when they're looking at it in the shop. And boom, we have our packaging. So now that we've got the packaging, the system in place, how do we show the system? Well, you can do this by using the brand guidelines. This is a template that we created here in the office. My office where we work with actual clients. The problem that we were having was creating brand guidelines for clients was kind of a tedious process. So we created a Figma template which is completely editable using components. So this template, you double click on the logo, you add yours in, it updates everywhere. You can change the global colors, change the global type styles, and within a few minutes, you've got a brand guidelines that you can just give to your client, or you can edit to your heart's content, but you've got a great foundation. So I did the brand guidelines with Tasty Trove. It was more of a mini guidelines. We do mini guidelines for every client that we work with, just to make sure they know how the logo works. So if you did enjoy this, press that subscribe button down below, say orange in the comments, so I know you watched up until the very end, because then I'll love heart you, and I'll catch you in the next video. See you soon. Goodbye.